Welcome back to the show. This is AM Show. We spice up your morning before you get right into the heat of the day. Of course, we looked at the newspaper review. We've done the newspaper review and looked online as well for what's trending in terms of news. We'll be talking about cerebral palsy. Like I said this morning, it is a disorder. It is a very disturbing disorder. I've got a doctor here in the studio who will be talking to us, and I will introduce her to you. But let me just give you a quick background. Now, doctors are apparently unsure, 100% sure, how children get to, get into that disorder called cerebral palsy. At least the way a child develops it. Doctors, however, do know that in 90% of the cases, children are born with it, whilst 10% are victims of birth injuries and medical malpractice. Cerebral palsy is an umbrella term that refers actually to a group of disorders that affects a person's ability to move. It is due to damage to the developing brain, either during pregnancy or shortly after birth. It affects people in different ways. Actually, it affects the body movement, muscle control, muscle coordination. Of course, I can go on, but this is not really my job. You do know that, right? And that's why I've got a doctor right here in the studio. I've got here Dr. Marilyn Mabel Wilson with the Mission Clinic, and she is with the neurodevelopmental. She is a neurodevelopmental pediatrician. Thank you very much, doctor. Very good to have you.
Good to be here.
How are you feeling this morning?
I'm good. A bit groggy, but I'm good.
Okay. You're happy? I mean, happy with the election and everything, the way it went?
Yes, I am.
Okay, congratulations, Ghanaians, and how the roles that we've played in this victory for Ghana, as they call it.
Yes.
And so I thought that it would be good to, break the ice a bit. Now let's talk about this serious thing. Developmental disorder. Before we go into the discussion as well, though, we do have an interview with a mother whose child has this disorder. Okay. So we're going to go and have a look at that interview, what she says to us about her child's condition, and then when we come back, we can go right into the discussion. So let's just go into that video right now, have a look at a mother whose child has this disorder. When we come back, the doctor will tell us really what we should look out for. What are the signs if your child is developing this disorder? What should you do? Please stay with us.
Cerebral palsy is the most common movement disorder in children. It has no cure, but can be partly preventable through immunization and other means. We will understand more of what it is, and I have with me two mothers who have children who have this movement disorder, Rachel Kwe and Patience Oko Odwe, with a little 3-year-old, a beautiful 3-year-old. They are going to tell us more about cerebral palsy and the experiences they have gone through. But before we do that, let's take a look at what cerebral palsy is. Cerebral palsy is a blanket term for several disorders that affect normal, healthy movement. Over 10,000 children are diagnosed each year. The word cerebral refers to the brain's cerebrum, which is the part of the brain that regulates motor function. Palsy describes the paralysis of voluntary movements in certain parts of the body. CP is a non-progressive disorder, meaning it will not get worse over time. Most cases can be effectively managed with treatment and continued care. 2 in 3 people with cerebral palsy can walk. While some children with CP require mobility aids, many are able to walk independently. 3 in 4 people with CP are able to verbally communicate. Oftentimes, assertive devices are used to help improve speech and hearing. There is no known cure for cerebral palsy. Fortunately, there are many treatments that can help both children and adults with CP live a full life. But what are the causes of CP? It is caused by damage to the fetal and infant brain. It occurs when there is neurological damage before, during, or within 5 years of birth that prevents the brain from developing properly. Damage to the parts of the brain that control motor function causes children with CP to struggle with posture, balance, and movement. Although this disability affects muscle tone and movement, it isn't caused by problems with the actual nerves or muscles. It is strictly the result of developmental brain damage. Some children develop cerebral palsy as a result of a birth injury caused by medical negligence. While rare, these cases are usually the product of a delivery room meltdown. Symptoms of CP include problems with movement of one side of the body, stiff muscles, involuntary movements or tremors, lack of coordination and balance, drooling, difficulty with speech, seizures, problems swallowing or sucking, and delayed motor skill development. Treatment is twofold. There is treatment early in life and lifelong management. Early treatment for children with CP is important because the developing brain and body are more resilient. This means there are more opportunities to correct or improve some of the child's mobility limitations during this time. Treatment isn't focused on curing or fully correcting a child's CP. Rather, it is nurturing a child's development so that they can live as independently as possible. Many children with cerebral palsy are completely self-sufficient and having satisfying, meaningful lives. Actively treating symptoms that coincide with CP is the best way to ensure the highest quality of life for a child as they transition into adulthood. So let's start with you, Rachel. You have an 8-year-old boy who has this movement disorder. When did you first discover it?
Actually, I gave birth normally in a hospital, and then I realized that he was turning yellow.
The whole body?
Yes. For me, I thought I had given birth to a white baby because I was the first timer. I didn't know what all this was all about. So after I gave birth to Daryl, I was at home, and then I think on the second or third day, a friend of mine came around and realized that the child was turning yellow. So they asked me to take him to the hospital. But unfortunately for me, when I took him to where I gave birth, they just asked me to expose him to the sun.
Okay, thinking it was jaundice.
It was. So my friend was like, I should insist for a transfer to another hospital, a bigger hospital. So I was given a transfer to 37 Military Hospital. And could you believe that when I got there, everything was like to the standstill. A 3-year-old baby, they said he had neonatal jaundice. And they had to take out his blood and replace it with another blood, someone else's blood, because it was that bad. And it has gone to the brain. So the doctors came to me. You can imagine a fresh mother, just 3 days old. And then they are like, Madam, what we are going to do is a 50-50 job. So it's possible he might survive or not. Looking at all the other kids in the court, I'm like, well, if that's what save him, they should go ahead. So they started, and then the process went on, and to God be the glory, he was able to get out of, he was able to go through the blood exchange. And then they brought him back, and then they said they'll put him under a phototherapy. That's I think some lights that they put him under for 7 days. So that is how I saw it. But I think we should take it from before he was born.
We'll get to that. But whilst they were doing the blood exchange, as you call it, what did they tell you it was? Reason why? What diagnosis did they tell you? They said
the boy has cerebral, he has a neonatal jaundice.
That was all.
Neonatal jaundice is it's a jaundice that has, if you say neonatal, it should be in the brain. So it has damaged a part of the brain.
Just 3 days?
Yes.
So then it gets us back to prior to delivery.
Exactly.
Did you notice anything whilst pregnant?
I had a delay. Yes, I had a delay. So I was supposed to be taken for CS, as in to be taken out, for the baby to be taken out.
How many days delay?
It wasn't like, I mean, when I was in contraction, I was contracting and all that. So it was like, I started, I think, 2 a.m. in the morning. And it was after 2 p.m. and I was still in pain, the water and everything had come. I could see the hair of the baby down there, but the baby was not coming out. Yes.
And how long did that stay?
Actually, they saw the hair of the baby just around 7 a.m. So the thing was dead till the 2 p.m.
And you were not taken for surgery when it was seen?
They said they were preparing me for surgery. I was waiting to be taken to the theater. But unfortunately, I don't know.
And it took you how long?
From 2 a.m. to 2 p.m.
12 hours?
Yes.
before you were prepared.
Yes.
Meanwhile, you could see the hair of the baby.
You could see the hair of the baby down there.
Wow.
So what actually happened was that after a while, then I was just there. So I decided to try and push myself. Then I saw something like hot coming out from, so I realized it was, so I shouted. Then they came and then they rushed me to the theater now, and then they took the baby out. But I realized that when the baby came out, the baby didn't cry. But at a point, I heard the baby crying.
Okay.
So they said, I learned when they cry, I'm not a medical specialist though, but I learned when they cry, oxygen goes to the brain and all that. But he didn't cry.
Okay.
So after they just discharged me the day I delivered, and then the next morning they discharged me.
Okay.
So I thought I'd given birth to a fair baby, a very,
Now, we have an immunization card where immediately you give birth, your baby starts taking.
Yeah.
Have you checked to see if it was done?
Yeah, it was done. The first one was done.
And everything was okay?
I am a fresh mother. I don't know anything about
now
that.
You know more about it. Have you cross-checked to find out to see if everything was okay by then?
Okay, what they did was, I know that when they give birth to a baby, there's the first one they do, like right when the baby comes, then the later you go for 6 weeks and the rest.
Yeah.
Yes. So this one was just as I gave birth.
But have you checked? Have you gone back to cross-check?
Yeah, I have the card with me.
Okay, we'll come to you patients shortly, but I want to find out if you visited the hospital for all your antenatal.
So those are two mothers there with Joynice's Hannah Odame, and they are addressing this very heartbreaking issue about their child. Her son is called Daryl, and Daryl has got cerebral palsy. You've seen that story, and I'm sure you're quite familiar with this.
Yes, I am.
Does it break your heart?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
okay. So I'm particularly interested in the story that she's sharing, and she talks about having a delayed labor, more like. Is that, I know that, I mean, from the background we know that it's not, the doctors are not 100% sure of the cause. Is that correct?
Not totally.
Not totally.
Yes.
Okay.
So we know that cerebral palsy is caused by early brain injury. Okay. And as initially said, 90% of the time we know the brain injury happens before the child is born.
Okay.
And 10% of the time it happens during delivery or just after delivery or in the first year or two of life. Okay. For those, the injuries that happen before the child is born, we know exactly what happens. What we don't know is why it happens.
Why it happens.
Okay, so there are a couple of things that can happen. They can get something that can be compared to a stroke, as we see in older people. Where blood is not perfused to certain parts of the brain, and so they lose their vitality.
Is it connected to something that a mother or a pregnant mother does or doesn't do necessarily?
So this 90% of the time I'm talking about where it's prenatal, before the child is born.
Right.
Most of the causes, and there are about 5 or 6, it has nothing to do with what the mother did. And we don't know why it happens. Very few times, if the mother has infections during pregnancy, that can cause it.
Okay.
Why some people will have infections during pregnancy and not have that, and why others will have infection and have that, we don't know.
You don't understand.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. Well, when we are expecting doctors to sort of deliver us from our misery of, from our health miseries that you don't know, that's a very scary position to be, isn't it?
Yeah.
So she's talking about the delay, that there was a delay, and could it be that the child was already not moving, and that was why he wasn't coming out?
Okay, so it could be different things. Unfortunately, because we don't know everything that happens in the womb.
Yes.
We cannot say for 100%. But what happens is that the 90% of the prenatal injuries, if it's not picked up, if we don't have ultrasounds and other things to actually pick it up, you may not know. If the child has an injury already, that affects the child's coming out.
Okay.
Okay, so the processes don't go as well because this child is already injured.
Yeah.
And coming out may be delayed.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So in this case that she talks about, the doctors waiting, that they could have taken her into surgery, but they were waiting. Could surgery have saved the situation somehow?
Okay, so I just listened to this interview, and there were two things happening.
Okay.
She talked about the neonatal jaundice, and she also talked about this delay. These are two different causes that can both cause cerebral palsy.
Wow, so she's got like a double dose.
Yes.
Oh.
So the delay can cause asphyxia, where the child, she explained it, where the child does not cry immediately.
Yes.
And what scientifically actually happens is that oxygen doesn't enter the brain immediately, and that can cause injury.
Wow.
But children can come out fine, where the brain is okay, but other things in the blood and infections can cause them to have jaundice, which can also cause cerebral palsy.
So jaundice can cause cerebral palsy. In that case, how do you know as a mother? Like she keeps saying, she's a fresh mother.
Yeah.
I don't know, these pictures. I mean, we've seen some of these pictures. These are some of the pictures of people with cerebral palsy. It breaks my heart terribly. I don't even know why. But what can a mother pick up? I mean, at this point, because she's talking about having a child, she thinks that this is a child that's a white. She said a white child took him to the hospital, and they say expose him to the sun.
Yeah.
What are some of the signs that you can pick up, and what can you do really?
Okay. So any child who has a baby, a newborn baby who has jaundice, especially in the first week of life, it's very important to seek medical advice. Okay. So what happens is that jaundice can be caused by different things. If it's mild and slow, it does not get into the brain. It doesn't cause injury. If it's high enough, it gets into the brain and it causes injury at certain parts. Okay. So what we say now is that if your child is jaundiced, make sure you seek medical advice, and the level of the jaundice needs to be checked. It's not okay for health personnel to just look and say that this is mild.
Put him in the sun.
In the sun. Actually, the sun does not do anything. So she talked about phototherapy. This is a special kind of light with a special kind of wavelength that has been proven to actually cure or to reduce the jaundice in the baby. Sunlight doesn't do that. So it's important for the level of the jaundice to be checked. And then if it's necessary to have treatment. So it's important to seek medical advice.
So, but then that's like one thing.
Yes, that's
so
for jaundice.
That's basically looking at jaundice. But then are there any other signs that you could possibly see? How would you know that this child is not behaving normally?
Okay. So
and at what point can you tell?
Okay. So for the first few days, babies should be crying strongly. They should be suckling well. They should be moving actively. And if the baby is not moving actively, you put to the breast and the baby is not able to suck, you need to be worried.
You need to be worried.
You need to be worried. Okay, then as the baby grows up, the baby should be active. You see eyes opening, you know, crying. By 3 months, okay, so the first developmental milestones, by 6 weeks, your baby should be smiling actively at you. As in, you smile and the baby smiles.
6 weeks, right?
6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks.
They should be smiling actively at you.
I say actively because all babies smile in their sleep. Okay. But at 6 weeks, the brain develops such that he or she sees you smile and responsively smiles back.
So if they don't smile back,
you need to find out what is happening. By 3, and for cerebral palsy, the important ones are what we call the gross motor development. So that's what you do with the muscles of the body. So by 3 months, the earliest sign, 2 to 3 months, their neck control begins. So when they're born fresh, their neck is always, you know, when you pick them up, you need to support the neck. By 2 to 3 months, it's getting stronger. So if your baby's neck is still falling back by 2 to 3 months, maybe 3 months, you should get worried.
Okay, so we're looking at two things here. You talk about the damage to the brain.
Yes.
And then a damage to...
So the damage to the brain is causing muscle... defects in the muscle control.
Okay.
So the brain is the one that's controlling everything.
Okay, and that's basically the equation, if you like, for cerebral palsy.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, and
brain
the way
injury.
to know, especially with babies, is to look out for how active they are.
How active they are.
Whether they cried on the first on the first time they probably appear on the earth.
Yes.
Or whether they smile back at you after 3 months.
6 weeks.
Oh.
6 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
Whether their neck control has begun by 3 months.
Okay, and then?
And by 4 to 6 months, whether they are sitting.
Okay.
And then when they're starting to roll over. So if by 4 months your baby cannot sit supported, as in you hold him with or her with pillows or with your hand and they cannot sit, there's a problem.
There's a problem.
Yes.
I see. Could this actually lead directly to death in children or as they grow up?
Yes. So you're talking about cerebral palsy?
Yes.
Okay. So all the causes we've talked about can lead directly to death immediately, even before the child starts to grow up. If it doesn't lead to death and the child does have brain injury, yes, the diagnosis on its own, cerebral palsy, has lots of other complications that can lead to death.
Okay, if you could go through some of
the complications. Okay, so we talked about the fact that everything has to do with the muscle control. Okay, so a lot of these children will have difficulties in swallowing. So they may be drooling a lot. They may be they cannot chew solid foods, and they may have to be taking porridge-like foods all the time because they cannot swallow properly, and they cannot coordinate the breathing and the swallowing. Sometimes we have what we call aspiration, where the food goes the wrong way and goes into the lungs, and that can cause a lung infection and pneumonia, and that can cause death.
Wow. How long can a person who's got cerebral palsy live?
Barring all complications, they can live a full life.
Really?
It's usually the complications that cause death or shortens their lifetime.
Would you say this is something that's genetic? Does it have any linkages with your genes? I mean,
so the 90% we talked about where it's prenatal.
Yeah.
There's a small group that is caused by genetic malformations that cause the brain not to be formed well. And so this brain that is not formed well then leads to cerebral palsy, but it's a very small group.
Okay.
So there is a small group that is due to genetic malformations, not direct genetic malformations as in mom has it and gives it to child, but just during the process of creation.
Now you are a doctor and you are with the neurodevelopmental. You're a neurodevelopmental pediatrician.
Yes.
How widespread would you say education has gone on to women? With pregnant women. I don't think you should be necessarily pregnant to know this. To know this, the signs that you should look out for when you have a child. So, how well would you say information has gone down, and how much more can we do?
It hasn't gone down well, I must say.
Okay.
And the reasons are varied and a lot, but there's so much more we can do now for women, because I see lots of mothers who may be on their second, third child and still do not know the signs to look out for.
Wow.
The things they need to insist that the health personnel do for them. Yeah, so we have a long way to go for advocacy.
What are the things you can insist for? And with health professionals, you're talking about those who are in charge of your delivery, perhaps.
Delivery, those in charge of you before you deliver, those in charge of your baby, after everything.
What some of the things you should insist that they do?
So one thing I talked about was the jaundice, making sure that the levels are checked to be low enough to be able to go home.
Okay.
If you have an infection and you go to the hospital whilst you're pregnant, you need to make sure that it's treated and treated well.
Right.
You need to make sure that you have early scans when you're pregnant. I know not everybody can do that, but that is where we need to be. Yes, that's where we need to be getting to.
So in your opinion as a doctor, you are looking at if government should do anything about it. So, I mean, what will you really look at? Government, private sector participation to get this out there? How can it, you know, the message get out there?
Both of us, media, government.
Well, we're doing our bit here.
Yes, and kudos to you. You are trying. So everybody needs to get involved, because women, we are everywhere. You know, so the education needs to be everywhere. The public and private health sector need to up our game in educating women as to what to look out for, and what to do for themselves when they're pregnant. And then, of course, the government also needs to help out, because not every woman will be able to afford all the things they need to afford.
Is the NHIS of any significant help?
Yes, if it's working properly at where you are, it should be, because it covers your antenatal care. It should cover your delivery, and it should cover the baby up to
if it is working.
If it's working well.
Is cerebral palsy the same as autism? What's the similarities and differences between cerebral palsy and autism?
They're two different things. They are both developmental disorders in the sense that you pick them up whilst the child is growing up, but they are two different things. Well, the similarities also is that it happens in the brain. The causal effects are seen in the brain, but cerebral palsy is to do with the muscle control, posture, movements. Autism is a different ballgame.
And in Ghana, we don't have a lot of support, innovative supports for children, do we?
No, we don't. Very, very little support for both cerebral palsy, for autism, in fact, for developmental disabilities as a whole. And it's difficult to blame, though, but we seem to be so bogged down with infections and HIV and pneumonia that our attention hasn't been drawn to developmental disabilities. That we start looking
developmental disability. How many people, children, do you have any statistics as to how many people it kills, for instance, this developmental disability phenomenon?
We have like international statistics. We don't have local statistics, but for cerebral palsy, it's supposed to be 1 or 2 in 1,000. That's internationally. I can definitely say it's much more in the developing countries and in our country.
It tells you that we really have not paid attention to developmental disability, like you're saying.
No, we haven't.
Wow. I'm gonna take your very final words, because we go. We should be wrapping up in a bit, but I've been here in the studio with Dr. Marilyn Marble Wilson. That's a very sweet name, Dr. Marilyn Marble Wilson, and she is a neurodevelopmental pediatrician. She is with the Mission Clinic, helping us to understand what causes cerebral palsy, and what you should look out for, what you can look out for, what you can assist that health professionals do for you, so that we can prevent this development disability. I'm going to take your final words on it. You've mentioned that mothers don't seem to know, women don't seem to know what they should do, and their education, the level of education is really low, so we should really be doing a lot more. But what's the life expectancy for a child that's got cerebral palsy? You've mentioned that depending on the complication, but over the time that you've looked at cases like this, what would you say has been the chances for them, their survival?
The oldest person I know with cerebral palsy, not in this country, is in his 50s.
50s?
Yes.
That's a good thing?
That's a good thing. Okay. That's a good thing. Because this person had good support. And since I've been seeing children with cerebral palsy here, the oldest I think will be in early 20s. Early 20s. So it's much it's much lower.
Right. What will be your final words, doctor? And it will break your heart. You will get a lot of that over because you've seen it over and over again. What would be your final words? Perhaps some law enforcement agencies, some members of the legislature, newly elected members of the legislature are listening to you. They might take some cue from there.
So my final words would be that developmental disabilities, of which cerebral palsy is inclusive, it's as important as all the other things we're looking at. And so it's really now time for us to look seriously at it and to make ways of supporting these children as best as we can so that they can reach their full potential, because they are all parts of the society. They're as equal as any other child.
All right. Thank you so much, Doctor, for passing through. Dr. Marilyn Marbell Wilson is with the Mission Clinic. She is a neurodevelopmental pediatrician, and one thing that's really outstanding for me is that we need to pay attention. It appears that we have, looked at disability as a whole. We've looked at women and children issues, but this is an area that we really have not focused on, talking about developmental disorder, which is somehow preventable. And that's the bad thing about it. The sad thing about it. It's preventable, so you should have an idea what you need to do so you can prevent it and not walk into it and live with the consequences. My name is Gifty Andopia. Next is Roland, coming up with George Anda, Member of Parliament elect for Ewutu Senya West. They're going to have, of course, an exclusive interview, and I'm sure you're looking forward to that particular interview. What has he got to say about his contender, Madam Hannah Tete? What has he got to say to his constituents who are interested to know what plans he's got for them? Do stay tuned. Roland is coming up right next.